All right, thanks for tuning into Game Tyrant Audio. I'm Nick Borrego, and I have the privilege to sit down with Jessica Curry, who you have heard her work in Dear Esther, Amnesia, Machine for Pigs, and now we're looking at Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. And if you caught my write-up I did on that earlier, you would know that I'm absolutely thrilled at what an amazing piece of work it is. It's one of those games that the sound is done so well that for me, I had to take a moment and just bask in the utter beauty of the environment because the sound was enhancing it so much. Such an emotionally powerful score. And so it's a grand opportunity to be able to sit down here with Jessica Curry and be able to talk a little bit about how the soundtrack was composed. Jessica, thanks for being on the show. It's good to see you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for your lovely words. I think the response to the game and the music has just been so overwhelming. You're going to start by making me cry at the beginning of the interview. Shame on you.
Well, that's the thing about when you go online, you'd see nothing but praise. It's just endless praise for Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. And it's completely deserved. You've had so many ringing endorsements from so many fans, but I also noticed that Austin Wintory of Journey and Assassin's Creed Syndicate recently, he has been nonstop singing your praise about the soundtrack, and I completely agree with him.
I think it takes an intense generosity of heart and spirit to do what Austin's done and to endorse someone else's work so publicly. And often we do that as composers back channel, but Austin's been such a cheerleader since Dear Esther, and I just find him so talented. But I think what makes him even more special is that personality as well. And I think you feel that heart and that passion in his music, and that's what makes it so incredible. And his Assassin's Creed Syndicate score is wowzer.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I was completely blown away by that. And there are some similarities in the way that he writes and the way that you write. I've noticed there's so much emphasis on beautiful strings arrangements and vocal arrangements. It's one of my favorite aspects of what you've done in the past. And with Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, I noticed people who just kind of generally say, yeah, I really like when, these strings come in and make it so emotional and powerful. For anybody who thinks that, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is one of the best examples I could think of in recent memory.
Thank you.
Pulls that concept off so well. Such as there's a track called All the Earth, and that's the first one that we hear in the soundtrack, and it seems to kind of lay like the thematic foundation for the score to follow. You tell us anything about how it was to compose All the Earth and also how it was to work with that amazing vocalist on that piece?
For me, Aileen Manahan Thomas, who's the soprano, she was the key to this whole experience for me. I'd been working probably on the score for about a year and I couldn't really find it. And the game is set in 1984, so I'd done a load of synth tracks, sort of Vangelis kind of style, and it wasn't working. And I sing in a choir, and we were singing, I think it was Duraflay's Requiem, and Aileen was the soloist at the concert, and I heard her sing. She started, and it was one of those weird Hollywood moments in life that you don't actually get in real life. I thought, I've found her, I've found the voice of Rapture. This is the missing key. And as soon as I heard her voice, everything fell into place and it kind of wrote itself. It sounds crazy, but that's how it happened. And I just feel so fortunate that we were there on the same night of that concert.
The moment in Rapture for me, when you walk into the chapel, and I can't remember the name of the piece that it was, it might have been Liquid Light, but when you walk into the chapel and you hear her voice, it was one of those gaming experiences that takes you back and you think, wow, just the execution here is just world class. It's incredible.
the quality of the players, I've never experienced anything like it. And it was just one of those soundtracks and one of those experiences where everything just came together. We had the right people. Sony Music were incredible at gathering those experts together. And I just was so passionate about not creating another video game score that sounded like everything else. And I wanted it to be very English, pastoral. I wanted it to come from a classical tradition. And I didn't want blaring brass, and I didn't want loops. And of course, that isn't, there's lots of game music that isn't like that, but I'm very used to hearing a lot of fairly similar scores. And I just wanted to create something gentle and beautiful. And I think that's what husband Dan, creative director at the Chinese Room, does so well, is he creates these experiences that speak about life and grief and love and passion and what makes us human. And that's what made it, in a way, not easy to write the score, but my God, what a subject matter to be able to be given as a composer.
When you guys were crafting the story and this whole concept, when it came to the way that you wrote for it, did you kind of have the story developed first and then you wrote the music along with that outline, or did you kind of craft the music along, parallel with how the writing of the story developed?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We work very holistically at the Chinese Room. So I started writing music while Dan was just telling me a very vague story of what he had in mind. And I was always try and feed him some mood, even if things really, really change, which indeed they did musically from where we started. But it just gives him that ability to be thinking about the kind of texture really of the game and the atmosphere we're trying to create. But when it really happens for me is when I get Dan's words. He's a fantastic writer, and
Absolutely.
oh, thank you. I know I'm married to him, so I actually have to say that contractually.
Oh, contractually not. It stands. Incredible writer.
And I just find his words really inspiring. And so he came up with these 6 main characters for the game, and that was when I decided that I would write a separate musical theme for each character. Partly practically, because like you say, we don't see the characters, they're these orbs of light. So I very much wanted to be able to say subtly to the player, this is Wendy or this is Jeremy now that you're looking at, but also to emotionally tell the stories of each character. And I think what I really wanted to do was use lyrics that Dan and I worked on together, so each character has their main theme song that explains in a nutshell the essence of that person. And that to me is if there is an achievement of the soundtrack, it's that distillation of each person's inner core in a way in a song, and that was just such a joy to do. So I love Wendy's song, The Morning Tree, because Wendy, I mean, she's a very divisive character anyway. People either really love her feisty pensioner spirit or they think she's an interfering old battle axe, and there isn't anything really in between. But what I tried to do with the music is write a very girlish theme that explained that she was young once. She wasn't always this old woman that you see before you in the game, and that there's a reason why she's had to become this hard.
In their song, I heard your song, I heard the bombers drone. Beneath those birds and the swaying lute, I heard you coming home. Oh, my love, where did you fly after you came home to me? Like the night child left me here to nest in the morning dew.
And it tells that story in the song. So having Dan's script to hand to explain those people was really important. So that is when the music came together for me, is when that script was finished. I could say, okay, I know these people and I'm going to write the music of these people.
I've noticed how complex the situation is, and everybody's gone to the Rapture when this unexplainable event is happening, and they're kind of clamoring, looking for answers, trying to figure out a plan, and in the meantime, they have their own set of issues happening within their personal relationships.
Yeah.
That's when I heard A Storm Over Youghton, and the way that it seemed to do a really great job in bringing in that complexity of the situation, where you have this element of fear as well as amazement and wonder at what's happening.
It's interesting that you've chosen that one, actually, because for me it's a real turning point in the experience that the player's having, and it just tips from this thing that's, quite bucolic and it's rural and it has elements of trouble in it, and maybe sometimes, and melancholy, but Storm Over Youghton, it really goes, okay, this is where we're turning up the heat in a way to say something's happening. It was difficult to do that because Dan created an open world experience, which I could have strangled him for, because it made my life so much more complicated.
It sounds a very complex process.
And we'd had so many discussions about how do you score a narrative experience when the player can choose their own narrative journey. I mean, it caused endless technical and creative headaches. But Dan, in the end, said to me, basically score what is going on at that point. You have to almost let go of the traditional narrative musical arc that you get in either a traditional game or in a film. He said, just follow the player. What are they experiencing at that time? And Storm Over Jotun, I think, was a real point where I just thought, the player's probably been going for a certain amount of time. This is likely to what they've experienced. This is where we start saying something is very, very wrong.
And was it challenging to be able to have such a complex set of emotions and also the tone of the music in parallel with that? Was that kind of the challenge to say, okay, we're not necessarily going to make this a horror sound, but also there has to be plenty of mystery to make sure that there is that element of fear there? Was it hard to not overstep that boundary?
Yeah, really, really challenging. And I was very glad to work with Adam Hay, who's our sound designer at the Chinese Room, because we worked together to put what we called procedural music in there as well. So you had opportunities to score what I kind of called the ghost of the world. So it would be fragments of Aelin singing or fragments of the choir that would be time stretched and manipulated. And it allowed the music not to be constantly there, which is something we're very passionate about at the Chinese Room. Increasingly, I feel like music follows you constantly in every visual experience that we have, and it drives me mad. But what the procedural music allowed us to do is say, we don't have to have music all the time. We don't have to be telling the player how to think or feel all the time, but we can just be providing these subtle echoes and kind of little manifests, really, of the action or the music that's happened, and we'll just trail that out and be giving this ghostly feeling of unease that's still really beautiful. And that was the line for me. I didn't want to just create this, like Dan and I always talk about The Road, and it's just too much. Like the film and the book, it's just like tragedy porn, where you're just filled with misery, and it becomes laughable because you're going, oh right, they're eating a baby now. You're so desensitized to it. And Rapture, we wanted to walk this line of always reminding the player that these terrible things are happening, but it's about acceptance at the end of the day, that the world is so beautiful and our lives are very, very short while we walk on this earth. And even while these bad things are happening, it's really important to go, but I'm looking out the window and seeing a beautiful tree. I'm hearing my kids laugh, So that was what we were trying to say, I think, in the game and the music. Is always saying, it's hard, but God, it's beautiful.
It was amazing to see that beauty that you guys had infused into the experience. It was very unique that way, and that when I played it, I felt like I don't know if something really terrifying is about to happen. It might, it might, but I can't tell if it is. In the meantime, this environment is gorgeous. I wish I lived in this town. And when you look at a game that's is so complex with emotions that way, it's amazing because I was reading a blog that you guys had on the website talking about how Amnesia and Machine for Pigs, you guys had what, like a 3 or 4 day break from that, then dove right into the production of Rapture.
Yeah, crazy.
It's amazing.
Amazing and yet stupid. Because yeah, we were just dead after, anyone who makes games or makes anything creative will tell you it's just exhausting. It's wonderful. But yeah, we should have given ourselves, it was naive to go, yeah, we'll just go and do the next one. And Rapture was so emotionally involving because it's about the death of everybody on the planet, Nick. It doesn't get much harder than that. And Dan and I were dreaming about the apocalypse by the end of it. We were kind of having nightmares. So the next thing that we're working on, hopefully, I think is a little bit lighter.
But this had affected you personally then?
Yes.
With how great Rapture is and how well you guys have implemented all the concepts with all of its complexity and its intensity and the way that it breathes the way that it needs to, and then is very dynamic in that it allows that atmosphere to open the way for such a terrifying subject. Would you say that when after Rapture's been done, that it'll be a bit of a break to kind of decompress from that amount of work and then see whatever the next project is? Are you going to be involved just on the music end? What can we expect from you as far as a game project that you may foresee in the future?
Well, the amazing thing about Dan, out of the many amazing things, is creatively, he is just a machine. I have never known a man be able to generate ideas as quickly as Dan. He's out of this world. So we came off Rapture and we were exhausted. But about 3 days later, he went, I've got a brilliant idea for a game. I kind of went, no, you
But I
love
can't.
it. I don't want to hear it. I don't care. I want to go and lie on the beach. So he has got a couple of ideas. And I just think Dan's going to keep getting better and better. Like I say, we're relatively new at making games. And I think each game, Dan has taken something amazing and kind of fed it into the next one. And I do think the next game that he's working on is going to be the best game yet, but very, very different to what people expect from the Chinese room, which is exciting for us. I think we felt, in a way, like we'd gone as far as we could with the kind of games that we make. The walking simulator, as people coined it. Rapture was kind of almost like the distillation of this form. And we're always going to make Chinese room games. We can't escape the fact that it's a writer and a composer kind of running the company. So we're always going to have that obsession with experience. But I do think Dan is going to push it in a very different direction for the next game. So yes, I'm not making the game because I've stepped down as creative lead and studio head, but I will be writing the music for the next game. And I'm concentrating in general on my music a lot more. And it's been a joy the last couple of months. The company did eat my life in a way. And what I'm actually okay at and what I love doing is writing music. And I just felt like I wasn't getting enough opportunity to do that. So it's terrifying to have suddenly gone freelance, but it's also really exciting.
For me to step in and make sure that that it's known that and said what you do is a lot more than just okay at writing. It is
Thank you.
the absolute peak of the quality of Rapture. I think it's not to discredit anything that the rest of the team does, because obviously they're an extremely hardworking and an extremely talented team. But to me, it was the music that stood as like kind of like the binding glue to the whole entire concept that just made it such an emotional experience.
Thank you, Nick. That's such a lovely thing to say. Thank you.
I feel very privileged to be able to talk to you about Rapture. And so when it comes to the kind of composer that you are today, the level of quality of composition you make, the sheer beauty in what you write, it makes me very curious as, maybe looking into your past, before you became a career musician. What or who do you think, if you could pinpoint it down to anything, was one of the main driving influences in your life that steered you in this direction?
Well, I was born in 1973. It's like, how far do you want to go back on this musical journey, Nick? You're going to wish you never asked this question.
Hey, we got all night.
I started playing the piano at age 4 because my brother played it, and I was always like really wanted to do my older brother whatever he wanted to do, and I loved it. And it was really interesting, though. I always loved really melancholy music, even from that age. And my mum's a playwright, and she wrote a play when I was 10 called But Robert, Nobody Dies for Love Anymore. And it was about this hopeless romantic. And she used Elgar's cello concerto to score the play. It was all about the kind of interrelation between his love of this piece of music. And I remember hearing it for the first time, and it was like this epiphany of going, this is incredible. I remember it so well. It's funny, I don't have much of a recollection of my childhood, but this moment is kind of seared into my brain of just going, I still don't have the words for that experience of going, this emotion and this passion through music. And from that point on, I thought, I can't imagine doing anything else or being anything else, because I'm sure you'll feel the same. Music's where it's at. It's got everything. It is the absolute link to our souls. It's so visceral. And for me, no other art form. I mean, I love film, I love theatre, I'm a passionate reader, but music it's like that. It just touches inside you. And I don't know, I'm not classically trained. I ironically then didn't go on to study music. I read English literature at university, but always played.
Amazing to hear that. I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm very underconfident as a person. And I did A-level music at school, so from 16 to 18. And he always said I wasn't very good at composing or playing, and he kind of did a bit of a number on me. And I really lost my confidence. So then did literature instead, which I loved. Then spent 3 years at film school. But yeah, never went to a conservatoire or, did music theory particularly. So I've spent a lot of years going, I'm not really a proper composer. And Rapture, I feel like I've graduated. I can call myself a composer now and go, I can do this. It's fine. You don't have to be apologetic. You don't have to say you're a bit rubbish, which I've spent a lot of years doing. And Rapture for me was the culmination of a lot of things. And the reaction to it, the emotional reaction to it, has been, honestly, it's so overwhelming. I've never had so many people write to me with personal stories and what it means to them. And I think Rapture is this big ball of, I think I'd lost my stepdad, who I was incredibly close to while I was writing the score. I think that's in there. My illness, I think that outpouring of that personal story of feeling that life is so short but so wonderful, I think that's in there. And at the end of the day, I truly believe that the pieces of music and the art we respond to has something so deeply personal in it, and we recognise it, and it goes past taste, and it goes past what you actually think you like, and it goes into a recognition of, this sounds really, really pretentious, but what it is to be human. We recognise another person and their spirit, and I think that is what is wonderful about art and music, and nothing else gives you that feeling apart from the person you love, probably. Sorry, that was really long.
That was absolutely fantastic. In fact, I now feel like these other questions I ask you could never top what you just said. I'm like,
what's your favourite colour?
yeah. So do you like go to movies? Like, it's just there's nothing to.
Exactly. Where do we go from there?
Such a great way to explain that. I was going to transition that into some of the first music you would listen to. Like what was the first album you had bought, and what do you find most rewarding about your career? But it's just there's so much power in what you just stated. I almost feel like I I almost want to just like, okay, now that we know how awesome you are, where can we get your music? Let's do this then. This is a first for me. I've never had this happen to me. I think when you get an answer like that, you're like, wow, well, we can wrap it up on that. That's the apex.
I think we all find our place in the world, don't we? And I think music is so unique for that. I think you find your home. And I think, we started this interview talking about Austin Wintory, and he's another person. I think there are people that shine. And it is, like I said, it's not just because of their music, it's because they are putting something of themselves into their work. And that's what we respond to. And I think in a world that is so increasingly plastic, we crave authenticity over everything else. And when we find it, we recognise it and we hear it and we see it. And that's what we respond to when someone actually has something real to say.
With everything that we've known the experience with Everybody's Gone to the Rapture and your previous works, it is extremely fascinating to hear that you've kind of carved your own path despite being told that you were incompetent, despite the physical ailments you've had to cope with. And, that's one thing I wanted to make sure I had you on here, because it was such an impressive piece of work. As an indie game, to me, it seems like the quality of it is more substantial than most AAA titles that I play based on the story. And that is what keeps me coming back to games is the story. How do I identify with it? How does it affect me on a personal level? And so with the score that you've composed for that, it is absolutely executed to a masterful degree. And I think everybody is in for a huge treat. If they haven't played the game, by all means, please just stop what you're doing. If you're playing anything, take the 2 hours to play Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. Would you say that iTunes is probably the best place for people to be able to go and pick this up then?
Absolutely, iTunes, Amazon. It's just come out on vinyl, which is really exciting because that's the first time my music has been available to play on a record player, and that is amazing. And I don't know, I played it yesterday. It came a couple of days ago. And it feels like vinyl is this soundtrack spiritual home. There's just something in the music, that warmth and that kind of nostalgia that the record player evokes. But thank you so much for your kind words, Nick. I want you to come and live in my office. And say nice things about me every morning.
Hey, I noticed this part, Jessica. Let me talk for about 5 hours on this one part of the song that I heard that I could just go on and on and on about. But it really service it. I mean, every word. It's a fantastic bit of work, and everybody would do themselves an immense service to check out Everybody's Gone to the Rapture if they haven't yet. And if you can't find it on vinyl, which I will do my best to try and get it on vinyl, because that would be one killer collector's item, to go to iTunes, find it there, purchase it, and experience some amazing music. Something that, for me, I haven't quite experienced yet in a video game soundtrack. Jessica, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me for Game Tyrant Audio and being able to be in the lineup for these composers that create this amazing music. We would be absolutely remiss not to have you on as soon as we could, and I'm just thrilled that we were able to have you.
Thank you so much. It's been a lovely experience today. I've really, really enjoyed it. Cheers, Nick.
Wonderful. Cheers, Jessica. I will talk to you soon.
Bye.